My leg. That would not be good.
Guys, stop having fun.
No fun. Sorry.
This is serious.
We're serious.
And greetings and salutations. We welcome you to...
Pick a side. Will you live? Will you die? Will you quit? Will you try? Sweating eyes. Who am I? Champion till I die. Every morning, every night. Boy, I gotta look alive. Now you can hear the crowd going.
Oh, yes, the jab. This is going to be stopped. I think Mango's going to do it. Yes, he is.
Pressing more with the Sonic moves against Problem X. Finds an opening, uses the bar, activates off the target combo. Can he get it? Problem X takes it over Daigo.
Nice! The walk up, I can't believe it. And he got super. Is he going to actually kill him? No way. He walked the entire strip. Are you serious?
Oh, you're dead. You're dead.
Gatsuka's got it all to do. Last year's champions in big time.
Oh, he wanted the activation.
Throws the back, the forward dash. No!
And again, he interrupts it. Hondo.
And we welcome you inside the Novo here at LA Live in Los Angeles, California for our live 2019 Capcom Cup pre-show, where today a brand new Capcom Cup champion will be crowned. Yes, lots of surprises happened on Saturday as we move into our final day of competition, and we will break it all down with our esteemed panel. My name is Ardo Cal. I am your traffic cop, your anchor, making sure things move along nice and smooth. Alongside me, my often tag team partner, the 2018 Esports Journalist of the Year, Jacob Wolf, and one of the longtime revered voices in the FGC, Sajam, who had a very busy day yesterday. You were here early, you did commentary, you had that jacket on, and you're doing it all again.
Yeah, it's cold in here, so I did have the jacket on. But yeah, it was a long day, but it was a really fun day. I think the day was full of really, really fantastic matches. And like, if you're a fighting game fan, they really squeezed out as much as you can get. Every set was like down to the wire, down to the last hit. It was really a really fun day of fighting game action, I think.
They squeezed the life out of you too. I mean, I was like watching. I had to leave early, and I was watching. And you were all the way till the end, right until Street Fighter League too.
Yeah, I was working the long shift, and like in the last little bit, you know, I was like hanging in there. I was like, yeah, he gets the yeah, and it was like I was fading. I was like, oh, we got to make it through. But I actually feel fantastic today, right? Like, despite it being a really long day yesterday, the matches were so good that I just have the energy, and I really want to go back and watch so many of those matches. But we have to go forward, which is like the unfortunate thing, because I'm like, man, there were so many good matches yesterday.
Well, before we go forward, we will preview all of the matchups here today. Let's start with Saturday. I should mention first that this pre-show is being hosted on the official Capcom Twitch account. We are live on twitch.tv/ESPN Esports. It is brought to you by Pocky. Share happiness. I have never tried one. I have a box. I will try it later. And Ryu and Chun-Li are on the box too. How nice
That's
is
really
that?
cool, actually.
They're kind of trying to do like a Lady in the Tramp thing, but Ryu's not interested. He's like, I want this Pocky, it's mine. He's like, he's that kind of guy.
We'll give it a try a little bit
They'll
later
fight
on.
it.
And of course, yesterday was the end of V Week, an organization, a cause very near and dear to us here at ESPN, the V Foundation, started by ESPN and famous college basketball coach Jim Valvano. 100% of direct donations go directly to fund cancer research. Like I said, to support the V Foundation, you can go to v.org/ways-to-give for more information. All right, let's unpack Saturday. A lot of surprises. Banchan, Evo champion, 0-2, out of the tournament, completely gone. Jacob, not so surprising to you because you did say that Smug would give him a very hard time, and he certainly did.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this at length yesterday about how when you come into an event like this and you have really no momentum when you play that first set, you're going against some of the best players in the world, and that was the case in Banchan. Banchan ended up playing against Smug, and that was quite the set. It went all 5 games. Both players were sweating bullets. I mean, like, Smug was just, like, emoting all the time, and, like, at the end, he ended up winning, and then we saw Banchan knock the losers right in the first part of the bracket, and then obviously we can talk more about that, but they ended up losing to Gachikun, the champion of 2018 Capcom Cup. So the Evo champ's out. Didn't he make it? He went 0-2.
On your screen, you're looking at some of the biggest moments that happened on Saturday. Sajam, when you think about it, what really sticks out to you from Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's 2 things, right? One is that there was a ton of those 0-2s that happened that were really shocking. I think Fujimura is another big one that I expected to go really far. Has never missed a Capcom Cup top 8. This time, he didn't miss like a quick fall to the losers bracket, right? It was immediate. He got dropped down and then went 0-2, losing to Knuckle in a really tense match. 3-2 they played off stream, and that was one of those matches where I was like, man, I cannot believe Fujimura's out of the tournament already. Banchan out of the tournament already, and as you know, you look a little later, not 0-2, but Gachikun out of the tournament already. Like, there's so many fantastic players out.
Big
Bird out of the tournament.
We both predicted he would go far.
So many of those top seeds are just like gone immediately. That's the kind of tournament this is. And the other thing for me in terms of moments and stuff like that was I loved watching, as such a fan of fighting games and Street Fighter in general, the Daigo Tokido set yesterday. As far as moments go, there were so many fantastic down-to-the-wire sets, but that one was just, there's so much legend and lore behind it that it was a really, really entertaining match, especially at the very end of the day. I feel like it re-picked up the spirits and energy of everybody, and that match it's always going to be legendary when those two play.
You started strong with your fantasy bracket. I think you went 7-0.
Yeah.
And then...
Well, you know,
Got a little haywire.
it's a long series, right? Like, there's a lot of matches there. My first round picks of the 16 matches, I got 11 right.
Nice.
So I was 7-0,
good.
and then it went all downhill.
Well,
from
you
there.
do have a really good track record in picking the final 8, so we'll get to that in a little bit. But we should also mention that our picks for winners, all 3 of them are out of the tournament.
Yep.
So that just goes to show you how unpredictable and how difficult this tournament really is, Sajam.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like that. I feel like anybody who's looking at a fantasy bracket that they made right now is like, huh. That was a pretty tough first day. Like, you know, usually Capcom Cup fantasy brackets, I think one of the winning ones I saw last year had like less than a third of the bracket correct or something. It's like unbelievably hard to predict. So, yeah, this is a really tough event. I mean, a lot of the top seeds have already been knocked down to the tournament. It's just how it goes.
So, Jacob, let me read some of the players, some of the prominent players that are already out of the tournament. We mentioned Banchan, Evo champion. The Evo runner-up, Big Bird, also out of the tournament. Fujimura, Daigo, Momochi, Knuckle, former champions, all the former champions that did qualify for the 2019 Capcom Cup, they are all gone. We are guaranteed a new Capcom Cup winner here, but that list of eliminated players is very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the fact that sort of these legacy guys who have been doing this for a long time, and some of them did play really well. I mean, it was interesting to see, like, Knuckle in the losers bracket in his first round. I was very impressed by his play in that match. But they are gone. We do still have some of those veterans who have been here a long time. One I'm looking at today is Tokido, right? Like, he made it through in the losers, and he's going to be playing later on today. But yeah, I mean, a lot of those legacy players, previous champs, are gone, and some of them, like Banchan, very surprisingly. So,
yeah. One player you said that was really somebody to watch out for was Oil King. You said that name multiple times on Saturday's pre-show, and guess what? He's undefeated, Sajam. Oil King with a very impressive tournament so far.
Yeah, I mean, both of his first matches, I expected, like, you know, he had a pretty good chance against Nemo, but I also thought he would run into Hot Dog second round, and I thought Hot Dog would be fine there, right? Like, if that was a match that was going to happen, I was like, all right, I'm sure Hot Dog will clean this up, you know, not a big deal, but an extremely impressive performance from Oil King. I think stylistically throughout the year, people have kind of caught on to the way he plays, but in the last, like, you know, little bit of this tour here, he's really kind of, I feel like, recomposed and come up with a new strategy, and I think he played fantastic yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to see him perform today. Obviously, being on the winner side of the bracket, he has a couple chances to make it through and make it into top 8 as we play in the top 16. But I think generally, like I was impressed. He went 6-0 yesterday. He dominated the competition. I didn't think he would have much of an issue with the first round, but I did think it's when he would meet Hot Dog. A lot of people were having up Hot Dog, yourself included, Say Jam.
Yeah.
And it turned out not to be the case. It turned out that Oil King was on fire.
The legs, man. The long legs of Oil King. Yeah, even in this venue, he's not wearing the shorts. It's a little too cold in here for
You
that.
said it was too cold for you, yeah. So Oil King is one of 3 Rashids that remain in the tournament. That is tied for most characters. It was the most with 6 coming into the Capcom Cup. There are also 3 Karens, one of them being the most prominent Karen, the top of the Capcom Pro Tour standings, who had a fantastic Saturday in his own right. We're talking about Punk. And it's interesting because on Saturday's show, Say Jam, we were saying we don't know which version of Punk we will see. Well, we certainly saw the better version on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because in the last couple of tournaments, Red Bull, he was really close to winning that over at the North America Regional Final. And then he went and played at Red Bull Conquest, which is an event that happens right before this, and it was like a team tournament. And he didn't win a round against like multiple different players who are very good, but like it's like, okay, well, this is the #1 seed on the CPT, and he gets beaten up by 3 opponents without winning a round at all. Like, it's really like, oh, that's a little weird. So, I think looking at him now, he looks way better in this tournament. He's playing fantastic, and I think Punk is like one of those guys where when he shows up and he's playing 2 form, you always expect him to make it far in the tournament. And I think how he's playing right now is fantastic, and I'm really, really excited for his first match of the day, him versus Problem X. There's a lot of history in that matchup, and those two have played so many times.
And both played really well yesterday, right? The surprising thing for me with Punk was how dominant he was against Machibo, right? I thought that he would win that matchup, but I would not have given him the odds to make it that clean. Just sweep him out of there, right? Super quickly. And Problem X also played quite well yesterday, and so seeing them today will be one of the things I'm really looking forward to.
And seeing Punk backstage, I had a chance to talk with him briefly, and just seeing him interact with some of the other players, he seems very calm. He just seems very happy, and he seems very confident.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of his general attitude most of the time. Like, he's very laid back, but when he is confident, I think that's when it's terrifying. You know that he's a player that, with full confidence in his own play, is fantastic. It's just like when he kind of has a loss that I think really beats him down, that's when he gets into his own head and doesn't play as well. But if he's playing to peak form, it's almost impossible to beat him, which is why his record this year and back when 2017 when he had so much success was so dominant and so impressive.
You mentioned the word dominant earlier. How about IDOM? Speaking of surprises, as we move into our biggest surprises, he has to be on the list. It was a 3-2 reverse sweep of Fujimura in the winner's bracket, moving on to defeat Infectious 3-2 as well. But he has turned a lot of heads here.
Yeah, I mean, IDOM is an incredible player, and I think a lot of us know that about him. But I did not expect him to come all the way back like that against Fujimura. Like, it was like one of those things where he won 1 game, and I was like, okay, 1 game, that's not so bad, right? Like, 1 game is not the end of the world, but then it was 2, then it was 3, and it was like, okay, a reverse sweep like that is almost unprecedented in a situation like this. So I was really, really impressed with his play, and I think he's one of those players that, a lot of people don't consider his character super strong, but the way he's playing, it's just world-class for a reason, right? And I think IDOM, you talk about that eye-domination, he's such an incredible player, and I love watching him play.
Yeah, I mean, clearly one of the most impressive Americans in this tournament so far. It's been an interesting. It was interesting yesterday for the Americans. Even those that were eliminated, Knuckle Dew. But one I was sort of shocked by was Strider.
Yeah.
Right. Strider came out swinging in that first set. Ultimately did get reverse swept, but not without trying.
Yeah, reverse sweeps are so uncommon too. So like the amount I saw yesterday was unbelievable to me. There were so many times that happened over and over and over where I was just shocked, honestly. And especially, his character G is not the most stable character, and I think it just kind of showed that as strong as he can be in the right hands and everything, when he gets knocked down, when he's on the defensive side of things, he just gets beaten up. That's the kind of character he is.
You mentioned G. We don't have any G mains remaining in the Capcom Cup. That doesn't mean we won't necessarily see G played today, but no mains remain. When you look back on the year and you assess the usage of G at top-level competition, what comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, G is, he's a really powerful character, clearly, but at the highest level, many of the other characters that are above him are so stable and so strong that they really take advantage of the weaknesses that he has. So you see those highlight reel moments where G is winning and then it looks fantastic and you're like, wow, this character's incredible, and then they don't show you the next round where he just gets knocked down and loses immediately, and you're like, okay, well, that's just the character. Extremely weak on defense, but so powerful on offense. So even in really capable hands, like strong players like Strider and Knuckle-Dew and obviously Smug, a little weak on the defensive side. And I think at the highest level play, having bad defensive options is so detrimental.
And we saw that with Smug, right? Smug came out, and it was a very tight, close game 2 for them in that series. And game 3, first round, perfected by Banchan, right? So it is a character that seems like he kind of bounces back and forth in terms of your momentum.
Well, Punk and Idom are the remaining 2 players from the United States that are still alive in this competition. There are 7 from Japan, including the last chance qualifier winner Moke, who went on a great run. He, in fact, won his. He lost to Mago in the winners bracket matchup, but then went on an incredible losers run yesterday, defeating Kichipamu and Momochi, eliminating both of them from this tournament. He's still alive. He faces Machabo today in his first losers bracket matchup. But just talk about Moke's run in this tournament, Sajam.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about him is that, he won the LCQ at the very last minute, and you look at that LCQ spot, and you always wonder how they're going to perform. It's a lot of pressure to win a massive tournament yesterday, and then show up today and play, but Moke's a Capcom Cup finalist. He's been here before. He has nerves of steel, and, the 2 people he ran into in loser side are Japanese players that he's probably familiar with, his fellow countrymen, people he's probably played against before, and he looked incredibly sound. That match against Kichipamu was controlled and very, very clutch.
Yeah, Kichipamu is someone we talked about yesterday, is someone we really believed in collectively on this panel, and to see him lose in Moke, I was a little surprised, to be clear. But I was impressed by Moke's sort of mental fortitude. It seemed like, even though this is the biggest tournament in the world, and obviously he's done well in the past here at the Capcom Cup, for him, it was very consistent. It seemed like he was very composed between matches, and that he kept it together, and then at the end of the day, we see him advance, and he's here in the top 16.
Yeah, and in the case of Kichipamu, I think both of the matchups, he went 0-2, but the matchups he ran into are matchups where traditionally his character, I think, is pretty good, too. So I was even kind of surprised to see that. Zangief's not the strongest character, but against Akuma and against Rashid, I think he actually fights both of them pretty well.
Let's talk more surprises from Saturday. Sajam, starting with you, what comes to mind?
Yeah, the big surprise to me is just how well Idom's playing. I'm super impressed with how he's looked this entire tournament. And the other one for me is actually the amount of tight matches. We've had so many 3-2 sets. There's been very few sets that have not gone the distance. And the amount of reverse sweeps as well. Those things to me are just very unusual, but very fun to see. And, we only have this kind of competition where everybody's here, highest level Capcom Cup at the end of the year, right, to really celebrate and see the culmination of the tour. So if every set goes 3-2, that's just more Street Fighter for me to watch, so I'm super about it.
One of the biggest surprises for me is, I think that this, from a raw gameplay perspective, the matches alone, I would say this is one of the best Capcom Cups I've ever watched, and I've been watching for 5 years now, so I haven't seen them all, but I've seen all of them since Street Fighter 5, and this is very impressive, to your point.
Yeah.
And sort of all the matches, it's been really enjoyable to watch all weekend.
I think they've definitely been the shining moment of this tournament for sure. The matches have been so good. That Tokido Daigo set especially was so incredible, but there's a lot of really close winner sets as well that were really fun to watch. And even first round, I couldn't believe how many of the matches were just so close.
I just love to see a competitive Daigo. I know I stand Daigo. I know many of you in the chat and watching right now are big Daigo fans as well. Give me some hope. 2020. Can we see a Daigo premier tournament victory in 2020?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I feel like he gets one every year that he is traveling around. I hope actually that we see some love maybe for his character and maybe we see him switch or something like that. But yeah, I think Daigo, he could always do it. That's the thing about him that makes him so fun to watch.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly disappointed that Daigo is not in this tournament, but let's talk about our biggest disappointments so far in this tournament. Just to recap, many of the top players have already been eliminated from the Capcom Cup, including EVO tournament winner Banchan, runner-up Big Bird, Fujimura, Gachikun, Momochi, Knuckle-Dew among those that are out of the tournament. Previous Capcom Cup winners that have qualified for this tournament are out of the tournament. We are guaranteed a new winner. But when you look at that list, or even some of the sets that you've seen, or even just anything from the tournament in general, Jacob, starting with you, what would you say is your biggest disappointment from Saturday?
I'm going to turn back to Big Bird, right? I hedged my bets on him and Momochi. Both of them underperformed and sort of I guess they didn't exceed my expectations, right? And I think that both of those guys have had incredible years this year. Obviously, Big Bird is was the runner-up of EVO, and Momochi is his legacy player who is always consistent, and you've seen him sort of have a good time, aside from not playing at some part of the year as well, right? We talked yesterday about sort of his ventures into Super Smash Brothers, but now, I thought that he would do a lot better than he did. To see both of those guys out, that's definitely my biggest disappointment.
Yeah, and for me, it's Kichipamu. I was really hoping to see him go far in this tournament. I think he's a really fun player to watch. And I thought that he had like a nice matchup spread. Starting with Tokido was somebody I think he had a pretty favorable match against. And then when he dropped into losers, I looked at the matchup and said, well, I think Zangief fights Rashid pretty well. And after, Moke went through that tough losers bracket yesterday, I was thinking, or LCQ the day before, I was thinking, okay, I think Kichipamu has a good chance here. So I was really sad to actually see him go 0-2. That was somebody that I was really excited to watch and see like how far he would go in the tournament. So just for like an entertainment standpoint, it's like, man, we missed out on maybe on some of those big moments that he can always bring to the table.
So let's take a look at some of the matchups for today. We're going to show you right now what will happen on Championship Sunday. We got some great matchups in both the winners and the losers brackets. We have some heavyweights still in the tournament. We have a lot of competition coming up. And including Punk versus Problem X, Sajam, which you mentioned, has a lot of fantastic background to it. It's an intriguing matchup. We have names like John Takeuchi taking on Phenom, Mago taking on Idom, and in the losers bracket, Luffy is still around facing Nemo, Hot Dog 29, and Gian. Gian is a name, Sajam, that you mentioned, is someone to watch out for in this tournament. He is the lone representative from Singapore in this tournament, and he is still going strong. As you take a look here, this is the winners bracket. Punk and Problem X, Fudo, Oil King, John Takeuchi, Phenom, and Mago versus Idom.
Yeah, and for me, the match that I'm most excited about here probably is going to be the Punk versus Problem X match. I think that to me is like probably the winner of that match wins Capcom Cup. It's kind of what I'm looking at in terms of the bracket. I think like both of them have the capabilities to do it, and they always have such tight sets, and I feel like that as a warm-up set at the start of the day for both of them, like whoever wins that is going to be on fire, and I think they have a really good chance to make it deep in the bracket.
And there you go, taking a look at the losers bracket there as well. So we are here at the 2019 Capcom Cup with your official pre-show. Happy to welcome Sherry Jennings to the program, who competed yesterday in the Street Fighter League. Let's really quickly touch on that. What was the experience like? How was it? And just give us an overall overview of yesterday's Street Fighter League action.
Yesterday, it was really nerve-wracking. We've been practicing all season for this, and unfortunately, my team, Team Frost, we didn't pull out the performance that we wanted. But I'm glad that we still had a U.S. team go into the grand finals, and they put on quite a show. I can't wait for Street Fighter League 2020, and let's see what we do from there.
Well, for now, we'll put the analyst hat on, and you mentioned Americans. There's two of them right now remaining in the tournament, Idom and Punk. Let's just talk about both of those competitors. I mean, we were talking on the pre-show, Sherry, about how we don't know what version of Punk we're going to get at a tournament. But on Saturday, we certainly got the best version of Punk, as he's still undefeated in this tournament.
I agree. He also had a great performance last year, and we also had the same expectations, but unfortunately he didn't pull through last year. But this year, watching him play yesterday, I was like, he's playing on point. If Punk's going to win a Capcom Cup, it's going to be this one with the way that he was playing yesterday.
Yeah, and like you and I both, I'm sure you've played Punk before, right? Like when he's playing at his best, it feels like you don't get to do anything.
You feel like you don't know how to play the game.
Yeah, I've never felt like such a horrible player. Like when I play Punk, and I'm like, maybe I should. Nope, that didn't work. Yep. Maybe I should. Oh, that didn't work. I'll try jump. Nope, he was ready. Like it's such a defeating feeling, right?
Yeah, it is. He's undoubtedly one of the best players in the world, and from his performance yesterday, I think he has a very high chance of taking it today.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like I think Punk is one of those players where you don't always know if you want to believe in him, but like when you see him playing like that, you don't know how not to, right?
Exactly.
You're like, yeah, he's just so good.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Like when he's at the highest level, he's playing at his like peak. It's just imagining somebody who could beat him. It's like that's too dangerous of a person. We can't let this Street Fighter player roam the streets being that good.
So talk about the matchup that he faces now in the winner's bracket here on Sunday. His first challenge, or his first problem, shall we say, is Problem X. What do you make of that matchup?
It's funny because they play each other all the time. Obviously they get really far in the bracket every single time they go to a tournament, and they play each other all the time. And I think right now Punk has been winning overall, but not by much. And it's great to see them having to play again. And same thing as you said, the winner of this, I feel like, has a very good chance of taking the whole thing. But to be quite honest, with the way that Punk's been playing, he's been 3-0ing everyone he's played so far. I think he's going to take it this time again.
Let's hypothetical here as we take a look at the bracket one more time. Let's say Punk loses against Problem X. What do you think that will do to his confidence? How has he bounced back from a loss, but still being in the tournament, going into a loser's bracket? How has he adapted to that in previous tournaments?
I think it depends on the Punk, to be honest. Sometimes he has had these really legendary loser's bracket runs where it's like, you just can't stop him. As soon as he gets put in losers, he's like, all right, now I'm losers bracket Punk. I'm going to play incredible. He's kind of said that about himself before, but it really depends, I think, on his confidence level and how he's feeling after the match, because he could be like, wow, I'm playing to my, I lost the problem, but he's a friend of mine. I'm still playing well. Or it could just be like that kind of defeat where he's like, man, I can't believe I lost. Like, I guess I got to make it through in losers. So it really depends on, I guess, his attitude after that kind of a match. And like she mentioned as well, like Sherry brings up such a good point. These two play each other so much in tournament, but even out of tournament too, they're always playing casuals. Yeah. They're like, I bet you my random select can beat your, like, what, like, you know what I mean? They're constantly playing matches against each other. So I think those two are super familiar with each other, and it should be a fun match. And I think probably a very close match.
Sherry, as a competitor, I want to ask you this. Take us through the mindset of a competitor last night going into today. So I know I'm in the top 16. Not me, but a competitor knows that they're in the top 16. How much prep, how much like discussion, or how much lab will happen from the end of Saturday Capcom Cup to when they compete on stage on Sunday?
On this level, I feel like they might not train, like they might not have pulled an all-nighter for sure. But after yesterday, I'm sure they all sat down. They're like, hey, this round was really close. What happened here? What do I need to fix? And obviously, all these players have so many matches, and they go review them and see, oh, this player has this tendency, this player has this tendency, and they've all played each other before, so they probably checked their previous matches and were like, hey, how did I almost lose here? Why did I win here? And they're gonna try to duplicate it and do it again, take the win today.
Yeah, and on that note, I saw like yesterday in the lobby when I was walking here in the morning, it was like 6:30 or 6:40 in the morning, I saw Daigo on his phone watching himself play against somebody, like to study for the first round. And I think now that a lot of the players are out, right, half the players are gone, the players that are still in are going to go to the players that are out and are like, hey, we should play some matches now, right? Because they know they're not going to run into each other, so that is that ability to be like, hey, we don't have to worry about what's on the line. Let's play games like, let me warm up for tomorrow, let me get ready. So that's also an option as well.
Sherry, when you look at the rest of the field, who really impressed you on Saturday, and who would you say comes out as some of your favorites on Sunday?
I can say that I might be a little biased here, but Idom, he has always been an incredible player, right? But in the previous years, it was pretty hard for him to pull through. Sometimes he didn't clutch it out. He just couldn't take the win. But from his performance yesterday, all his matches were really, really close. He came back. He did the reverse sweep, I believe, and it's great to see him perform this well. So I'm really excited. I say he is an underdog because, again, he's playing in a land full of the top tiers. You're talking about Rashids, Bisons, Karens, and here's this one Laura player from New York, and he's doing his best. He's showing people why he is a threat.
And you're absolutely right. It was a 3-2 reverse sweep against Fujimura, followed by a 3-2 win against Infectious. So a very impressive day for Idom in his first Capcom Cup.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that if he takes it today, he has to play against Mago. And that's going to be a hard one because I think out of his path, if he even beats Mago, he's going to have to play Phenom, and then he's going to eventually play Punk, according to my fantasy bracket. It's a lot of Karens he's going to have to play, and even though he plays Punk a lot, I think the matchup is more in Punk's favor, but I believe in Idom that he went to the lab, and hopefully he can pull it through again.
Yeah, like you mentioned the Karen matchups, especially like if he does run into Punk, like that's always been the person in the way. Last year, he was like one match away from qualifying for Capcom Cup, like the NA finals, and like Punk was already qualified. He had like no incentive, and he just showed up and beat Idom in the finals, and I was like, I guess I won't see you there, and just leaves, right? So like, yeah, if he runs into Punk, I think that especially that's a tough path, but maybe if somebody else gets taken out along the way, I think that Idom could have a good chance, and he's been playing so well.
Punk was in your top 8 yesterday, Sajam. Let's go through your top 8 predictions. 3 of the 8 made it through to Sunday, including Punk, Fudo, and Hot Dog. Just talk about, we haven't talked much about Fudo and Hot Dog. Why don't we break down why they were in your top 8 to begin with and what you thought of their performances on Saturday and their matchups on Sunday?
Yeah, I think Fudo played really well. He had that really kind of nail-biter set against Luffy where I was like, this is it. If Fudo lost there, I was like, oh no, it's the end. Like I was, betting so much on this guy to do really well. And he had that really tight match. And the thing about Fudo is that like round 1 he plays Oil King, and then after he plays the winner of Punk or Problem X if he wins. And I love watching him versus Punk, especially in this year now that he has Birdie to play against Karen. That's like a matchup that I think is like used to be really hard for Fudo against Punk. Punk used to always beat him up, and now he has a much better chance in that matchup. So I actually think Fudo has a pretty okay path if he can make it past Oil King, if he can get to that second match where he can play against Punk. But he's kind of notorious for being the second place king, and I sort of worry that that's the fate we're going to see here for Fudo, where he makes it deep, winner side top 8, and then ends up with like a 3rd or a 4th or something, where he's just so close to getting the championship but can't quite make it. It seems like it always ends up happening to him.
As we take a look at some of the footage here from Fudo, had an incredible winners round matchup against Luffy. Was able to vanquish Luffy there. Luffy's still in the tournament as well. He will be facing Nemo in the losers bracket. But yeah, we have some great matchups coming up here. As we look at the some of the brackets here, Sherry, what matchups, when you look at Sunday, really pop out to you and say, you know what, this is the one we really have to be paying attention to, and it's going to be incredible?
Well, we've already discussed Punk and Problem. Those are two of the contenders that I think could take Capcom Cup. But, you know, looking at the bracket, Mago has been playing incredibly well. Same for Phenom. I say the underdogs of this tournament right now would be, because Fudo has to play Oil King in winners, I think a lot of us have it on Fudo.
Yeah.
Because Fudo plays so many Rashids in Japan. Like, we're talking about the highest level of Rashid. And Oil King obviously is one of the highest levels of Rashid as well. But he might not have the same type of practice as Fudo does versus Rashid. Yeah.
Are you surprised by Oil King's success here so far?
To be quite honest, I am. He's kind of a wild card. He's obviously a great player, but his results sometimes are kind of inconsistent. Sometimes he does really well, sometimes he doesn't do so well. And he's been playing against the best of the best, you know, and it's great to see that he's made it this far. But Fudo is definitely going to be a tough one for him.
A 3-0 against Nemo, a 3-0 against Hot Dog so far.
Yeah, he has kind of like a unpredictable playstyle, and it's kind of risky.
Exactly.
Yeah, so when you mention like his results are, you know, sometimes it's really great, sometimes it's not so much. It's like, does the EX uppercut hit that day, right?
Exactly.
Like, that's the entire story about
Wake
Oil
Up
King.
Fierce, the Wake Up Roundhouse, you know.
Yeah, and it's like such a wild card, and so like, yeah, how he's playing, you know, his results, sometimes they're fantastic, and I think this is one of those weekends so far, but Fudo is such a like patient, solid player, so, you know, that's going to be a tough first round match, but if he makes it, he's in top 8 winners of Capcom Cup, and I think that's a really impressive performance from him so far.
We also have some intriguing matchups in the losers bracket. You just saw it there on your screen. Hot Dog versus Gian is a very interesting one. Gian was one of your players to watch, Sejam. He remains a player to watch, Sherry. What is it about this matchup that's so compelling? Hot Dog, of course, as a Bison main, Gian as a Ibuki main.
Well, to be honest, this is the first time Hot Dog's had such a great performance. This is his year. I've never seen him play so well, and I wouldn't put it past him to beat Cien, but Cien is not going to be easy as well because he's been consistently great for the past couple years, and he's always shown why he deserves to be in Capcom Cup. So we're going to have like a battle of the top tiers. We're going to have M. Bison versus Ibuki, and the thing is, Hot Dog, he clearly knows little things about each match and each matchup, and he has like the sickest setups. But so does Cien. So it's going to be great because they both have amazing V-trigger setups.
Yeah, they're both like really technical, fun players to watch, right?
Yeah.
Because like Hot Dog definitely uses the bomb with Bison in such an interesting way. He's such a fun player to watch. So between those two, it's like a battle of strategists. You know what I mean? So it's like a really fun matchup to watch. And like Cien and Hot Dog to me are both always so fun to like spectate because you always see something new every time you watch them play. So seeing them play actually it's like really cool, but it makes me a little sad because it's on the loser side. So it's like, man, one of them is going to be out of the tournament. I don't get to watch them anymore, but that's going to be a really fun matchup to watch. Even though the characters are both very strong, I think they both have explosive and pretty fun play styles to watch.
Cien representing Singapore, of course. Hot Dog, our lone representative from Hong Kong. Hot Dog defeated JB 3-1. Then got swept by Oil King going into the losers bracket, but eliminated the 2018 Capcom Cup winner Gachikun to get to this point here. So that's the matchup against Gian right there. How about Machabo and Moke? Let's talk about Moke a little bit, Sherry. Talk about, you know, winning the last chance qualifier, and the Saturday that he had was very impressive. He had some formidable competition, but he's still alive.
Yeah, Moke has been really impressive. Obviously, I competed in the last chance qualifier as well, so I was there. And I watched him qualify, and he had an amazing performance. Like, it's clear that he deserves to be in Capcom Cup. And this one, Machabo, has also been a great year for Machabo as well. Me and him, we both play the same character, so obviously I'm rooting for him. But this is going to be a tough one because I do believe this isn't the greatest matchup for his character, but he is the strongest Nepali out there. So to see how he plays this matchup, it's going to be a great match.
Yeah, and for me, like, it's one of those matchups where like Moke has had a lot of kind of momentum coming into this, right? So I'm very curious to see how Machabo kind of plays here. He's a world champion level player. In other games, he like switched over to Street Fighter, and I think his basics and like fundamentals are so good. It's like world class just how good he is at the most simple things, right? Like, you want to watch him and see like the fancy stuff, but it's actually just like really solid on the ground, really good anti-airs. Like, he just does all the basics right. So when you watch it, it's not like the fanciest thing in the world, but it's also like, man, he's just too good.
Actually, I want to ask about the last chance qualifiers, you having competed in them as well. How do you prepare for something like that? Just having hundreds of people in a tournament like that, and even just the mental preparation of, man, like this is my one chance to get into the or my last chance really to get into the Capcom Cup. How did you prepare for that?
So the competitive state of mind, you kind of don't think about the overall result. Obviously, you want to win the whole thing and take the last chance qualifier, but the best mentality to have is to think one round at a time. I just have to do what I came to do each round, and eventually, if I play my game, my basic, strong game, and you adapt little by little for each player, you'll get the result that you want. You just have to make sure that you're on point. You have to play on point in this game.
Speaking of getting the result that you want, we'll go back to the winner's bracket. How about the matchup between John Takeuchi and Phenom? We didn't talk much about John Takeuchi on this on our pre-show yesterday, Sherry, but he turned some heads and he said, you know what? Now you're going to be talking about me because I'm still here and I'm actually undefeated in this tournament. And he's going to be facing Phenom, which is a very intriguing matchup for both of them, I think.
Yeah, Phenom, he was originally a Necalli player, so I know a lot about him, but he did switch to Karen. So one of his biggest training partners who he had to play yesterday was Big Bird, who also plays Rashid, one of the highest level Rashids as well, and he pulled it out against Big Bird. So him playing against Takeuchi, I do have Phenom taking this.
Yeah, I would give him the slight edge as well. Especially, I think Phenom is such an incredible player, and he's so underrated. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like when when competitors talk about him, they're like, man, Phenom's so good. But like the general audience is like, Phenom's all right. I get, like, he just jumps with Nicole. You know what I mean? It's like the attitude is like so negative about someone who's such an incredible player. And what's interesting to me about John is I actually had him beating Gachikun round 1 because he's really good at the mirror match. Yeah, he's so good at the mirror match. So I was not surprised to see him make it here. But to have this chance at top 8 winners after last year, he didn't quite qualify for Capcom Cup. He was like 3rd place in the LCQ or something. He was so close. This is such an incredible year for John. And it's really cool for Team Liquid to pick up, you know, Nemo and John. And like Nemo's the senior, obviously. He's down in the losers bracket. He plays Luffy. But John, like the younger, like really kind of up-and-coming player who's really fantastic. He's been playing for a few years now. Qualified for Capcom Cup this year. It's really cool to see him like in the top 8 qualifier position. And the nicest thing happened, I was coming up the escalator yesterday and I saw the FGC manager for Team Liquid, and there was this tiny little woman behind him, and he goes, oh, this is John Takeuchi's mom. Like, she came all the way out from Japan, and she was this sweet little lady, and I was like, oh, I'm like a big fan of John, and she said like, oh, I've seen you on stream before, like when I was watching his matches and everything, and I was like, oh, this is like the most wholesome thing I've ever seen in my life. I was like, all right, well, I'm a John Takeuchi fan. Phenom sucks. He just jumps all the time. Boo! I don't even like, you know what I mean? I was like, John's the best.
Bias is completely thrown out the window. I meet John Takeuchi's mom, and now I'm a John Takeuchi fan. That's exactly right. By the way, they've met once in Premier competition in 2016. I guess we can omit that by this point, but it was 1-0 Phenom for those wondering at home. Let's talk Tokido, because he was one of the favorites going into this tournament. You said, though, on your stream earlier this week, you know, Akichi Pamu is a really, really tough first-round matchup. He did squeak through there, though, and he's still alive in the loser's bracket. He now faces Infectious from the United Kingdom. Sherry, let's start with you on this one. Break down this matchup, Tokido versus Infectious.
So Tokido, he's playing Akuma, and Infectious, he plays Zeku. He plays multiple characters, but I do think he will go Zeku in the matchup. And Infectious is such an incredibly solid player. And he's not, so he played Angry Bird earlier, and they both had a mirror match, Zeku versus Zeku. And you can see the 2 different types of players that they were. So I think Infectious is a very solid player. His fundamentals are really, really strong. He's not too heavy on the setups, even though he does have a few small setups with Zeku. But I think Tokido versus him is going to be a battle of how solid each player is and how technical they are. And I think Tokido might have it for this one.
Yeah, I think like for Tokido, he will take the fight to Infectious, right? Because Infectious is like a rather slow player, as you mentioned, very defensive, very patient. I can't think of almost anybody who's actually more patient than him. Like, he just sits there and blocks, and I'm like, how are you not doing anything? Like, I would have hit 100 million buttons by now. So yeah, he's like really impressive defensive player like that. But I think when Akuma gets to take the fight to you, especially in a matchup like this, it is pretty worrisome. Like, you don't want to let Akuma be the one to do that. And if you stay in like young Zeku, where you have like the walk speed and buttons, you don't have the anti-airs to deal with demon flip and the jumps and stuff like that. So I think in this kind of a case, like Tokido is going to come very prepared. There's tons of really strong Zeku players in Japan. Maybe not to the play style of someone like Infectious, but I think it's definitely something to think about in this matchup.
So we talked about how unforgiving the Capcom Cup is, right? Even in round 1, Banchan is a perfect example of that, right? Of how unforgiving this tournament can be. If Tokido is to lose here, how disappointing would that be?
I think it's a bit unexpected. I think a lot of people had Tokido making it very far, especially making it to top 8 at least. But it wouldn't really surprise me if he was to not make it at this point, because the level of play is so high right now. I still have him taking it over Infectious, but if he was to move on in the bracket, he would either have to play the loser between, I think, Fudo,
Oil King?
Fudo and Oil King. So if it somehow drops to Fudo, that's going to be a really tough match.
Yeah, those two have had so many close sets throughout the years, right? Like, that's been one of those matchups that's like tooth and nail every time. They really fight to like the last pixel of every single round.
They play each other all the time.
Yeah, it is like such a familiar match. It's like you sit on the couch and you're like, I guess we should play some more Street Fighter again today. Like, they play all the time, so that would be a really interesting matchup to watch too.
So we mentioned it off the top of the program that we will see a brand new Capcom Cup winner. All the previous winners that had qualified are eliminated. The EVO winner, Banchan, is eliminated, so that record will not be set here. But one record that could be set is the #1 seed in the Capcom Pro Tour standings, possibly winning the Capcom Cup, which has also never happened, and that is Punk. This leads me to my conversation question I'd like to ask you both about momentum. It seems like Punk is the obvious answer here, but just give us a couple names. Who do you believe, Sherry, starting with you, has a lot of momentum going into Sunday?
Let's see. Aside from Punk, I think Phenom has a lot of momentum. He's been playing really, really well as well. He hasn't just 3-0'd people, but it's been pretty convincing for the matches that he has won so far. I'd say for, surprisingly, Oil King, because his matches, I think he also has been sweeping people as well, 3-0s. So he has a lot of momentum going into this as well, aside from Punk.
Yeah, I would totally agree on the Phenom one as well. I think, especially because he played Big Bird to qualify, and that's someone who he's lost to before in the season quite a few times. So to get the W there and then now play against another Rashid after, which, you know, is, I think, objectively a little bit of a weaker Rashid that you would think about in John, I think he's got to be feeling pretty good about where he stands, especially because, you know, there's like people like Big Bird are out of the tournament. He could warm up with him. He could be ready for that matchup. So I think Phenom is definitely someone that I would cite as like looking pretty great coming into this kind of a position here. And I think on loser's side, actually, I would say Luffy. I think Luffy is one of those people that in loser's bracket has performed miracles before. When he had his crazy Evo run where he won in 2014, that's what he did. He plays Nemo first, which is a matchup that historically I think a lot of Urian players don't like against me. So I think Luffy actually has a really good chance to make it pretty far in the losers bracket.
And he only lost by 1 round. That matchup against Fudo in the winner's bracket went down to the last round. So if not for that, he might still be in the winner's bracket. He had 2 impressive victories against Dogura and Big Bird.
And Big Bird. That was
Evo
a crazy
finalist.
match.
Crazy match, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Luffy is definitely a great pick there. How about some upsets? We have a lot of interesting matchups here. We just talked about Tokido and Infectious, how that might be considered an upset if Tokido were to lose there. When you look at the brackets, what other matchups do you look at and say, this one might be an interesting upset, or maybe even I would place this one as the upset here today?
Yeah, I think for me, it would be Fudo making it past Oil King and then beating Problem or Punk. Like, I feel like either of those is, like, to me, like, I think one of them should probably make it to the winners finals of Capcom Cup. So if they end up losing or something in like the winter semis, I would be really surprised that either of them didn't make it, just because of how dominant both of them have been throughout the season so far. And just in general in CPT, they've done so well. And I think the other one for me is maybe like kind of like an upset, not like in that particular match, but how far they made it is John in Winterside. I think he looks incredibly impressive for the CPT season he has. So I don't know if I would have put him in that spot to maybe qualify for top 8 winners, but now I just look at it and I'm like, man, this could definitely happen.
Yeah. To me, I'd say the underdog, IDOM. I think if he has a great performance in winners and he makes it to top 8, like that would blow a lot of people's minds, because I can't put it past him. He is amazing, and I think Japan doesn't have as much practice against his character, and he you know, his first match is Mago. So the harder one, if he gets past Mago, is going to be Phenom, because Phenom does know the match. But if IDOM was to pull it through, like that would be a huge upset.
Couple questions actually follow up there. So let's talk about, because we talked about Sherry on the program yesterday, that you know, character matchups are so important, right? So let's dive into that a little bit. He is the lone Laura character here, and you had just mentioned that, you know, the Japanese players in particular may not have had a lot of lab time against a character like Laura. How much of an advantage is that for IDOM in a tournament like this?
I think it's a huge advantage, because it's the same thing. They also had the same perspective on the character G, and throughout this year they've been, you know, struggling against the G players like Smug, as you saw Smug beat Banchan earlier, and same thing 801 Strider. He's had a great performance against the Japanese players this year as well. So I think it's the same for IDOM, because I think IDOM is the best lore in the world. So they wouldn't have a lore to play or practice against on that level in Japan. So it'll be really surprising to see how Mago does against IDOM, because again, IDOM has practiced with Punk all the time, and Punk is maybe the best Karen in the world. Even though Mago and Punk have different playstyles, I think they might not be ready for IDOM and the momentum that he brings as his character. Because Laura is a character that will smother you. Laura doesn't give you room to breathe or anything like that. So I want to see how Japan does under the pressure.
And we mentioned that this is IDOM's first Capcom Cup. I believe he competed in EVO for the first time this year as well. Let's dive into the specific matchups here. Of course, we have 3 Rashids left. We have 3 Karens left. I believe IDOM is facing a Karen first in Mago in the winner's bracket. So that matchup, take away the player, just the character itself. Laura versus Karen, Laura versus Rashid. Break down those character matchups.
Well, I do think Karen has just the matchup. I think Karen does have the slight advantage, mainly because it's really hard for Laura to get her game started. She's known for her fireball pressure, but Karen has a move that gets her under the fireball pressure. And not only that, in the neutral, before Laura's even able to get her V-trigger, it's kind of a struggle because Karen's whole gameplay is in neutral. It's the mid-range, it's her low forward, it's her hit confirms that pushes you all into the corner. And Laura is a character that doesn't have the best defensive options. So when she's in the corner, she doesn't have the same options as other characters. For example, if they have a reversal, she's gonna have to guess. She's going to have to take the guess. But the thing is, the matchup isn't as important when Laura gets her V-trigger started, because that's when the fun begins for Laura.
Yeah, and in that case too, right? Like Laura, basically everything that Karen is good at, like you mentioned, is good against Laura, right? Her crouching medium kick is like her big button, and you want low pokes to beat the fireballs. And in this case, like, yeah, the character matchup is obviously in Karen's favor, but when we talk about the pilot of the character, right, that's the part that's important. So yeah, it's like a mix of both. On one hand, you want to think about the character matchup, but on the other hand, it's like, I don't mix a character that's like, she's okay, right? She's pretty good. She can definitely win. And like those big comeback moments look so strong. Like nobody else makes me believe in Laura the way he does.
Let's put an IDOM, hypothetical. IDOM wins the tournament, okay? Put it into context, Sajam. In the history of Street Fighter competition, the history of the Capcom Cup, EVO, whatever it is, how monumental would an IDOM victory be here?
I mean, it'd be incredibly huge, right? Like, obviously for him, he would be elated, he'd be super happy about it. And the big thing is, too, is that he is somebody who is clearly capable of competing at the world's, like, biggest tournaments, beating the best players in the world. But, like, nobody seems to believe it. He, like, doesn't travel that much because he's not on a team or anything like that. So, like, the few times a year he does travel, he's always had incredibly impressive results. He made it in here, and he's one of the lower seeds, but he's played, like, 7 tournaments. And some of the people who have qualified above him have been to 14, 20, 25, 30 tournaments on the CPT. So he did the least amount of, like, traveling to get into the CPT as you have to do, still made it, and is in top 16 winners. So it's one of those cases where he's clearly good enough to win a tournament like Capcom Cup. He's clearly good enough to beat the best players in the world. It's just he doesn't have like maybe the same kind of support with like a team or an organization backing him or something like that to travel all the time. So he has to like take the gamble on himself, come out the tournaments, and you see when he does, the results are incredibly good.
So you're taking a look at some of the IDOM footage on your screen here. I want to just remind you, reset a little bit, that this is the official 2019 Capcom Cup pre-show. We were on the air yesterday on Saturday, here Sunday as well, being hosted by Capcom. Thank you very much to Capcom for allowing us here in the Novo at LA Live in Los Angeles, California, as we get set for the top 16 action. A Capcom Cup champion will be crowned. We are brought to you by Pocky. Sherry, are you a Pocky fan?
I am absolutely a Pocky fan, yes.
Sajam as
yeah,
well?
Can you believe he's never had Pocky?
I've never tried a Pocky before.
That's what
How's
I'm saying.
that possible?
Ever.
It's
I've had
delicious
so many
little bite-sized chocolate. Like, you can't go wrong.
Exactly.
They had a very good description of what Pocky is on the website. I didn't write it down, but it sounded I will try them later, I promise.
You can't go wrong.
Also want to mention, on a serious note, yesterday marked the end of V-Week, a foundation and a cause very near and dear to us at ESPN, founded by ESPN and legendary college basketball coach Jim Valvano. All direct donations go directly to fund cancer research. V-Week ended yesterday, and the V Foundation. So let's talk a little bit about, I want to talk a little bit about the players that are out of the tournament, particularly Banchan, because all the attention was on Banchan after EVO, obviously. But when you look back on Banchan's year, 2019, including this result, 0-2 at Capcom Cup, is it still considered a successful year? Would he still be happy about his 2019?
Overall, yes. He might not feel so happy now because he probably didn't expect to go 0-2 at Capcom Cup. But overall, he has had an amazing year. He's one of the I think he's won more premieres than Punk, but even though Punk has the most points,
I think you might be right.
Yeah, he has won more premieres than Punk has, and that's an incredibly hard thing to do because it's really hard to be consistent in this game, and the fact that you've won so many premier events, that's something that you have to be proud of.
Yeah, he had those big 4 wins back to back, right? Including one of them being Evo. And I think going 0-2, it's happened to some of the best players in the world, right? Like going 0-2 at Capcom Cup, it's not like one of those things. It's like, how could that happen to you, right? It happens to some of the best players in the world every year. And I know that right now, like you said, he probably doesn't feel that great. He wanted twins twice, right? Obviously, in life, he had twins, right? Like recently, him and his wife had twins. He wanted twins to win Evo and Capcom Cup in the same year. Those would be a great pair of twins as well.
I was talking to some people from Red Bull yesterday, and they were mentioning, you know, after he got the twins, they moved a little bit further away from the training facility in Japan. And I'd wondered what that did to his... a lot of people say it's the marriage buff, the kid buff, right? Like the power up, but like he did move away far. I think he's lives like 45, 50 minutes away from the training center. I wonder what that did for his training schedule, but also just his like motivation. I mean, is this indicative at all, or is Banchan going to be more motivated than ever in 2020?
Yeah, to me, I think that this is just like a tough tournament. You know what I mean? Like it's just one of those tournaments where you run into like Smug round 1, Goshkin round 2, right? It's like, you know, these things happen even in an event like this. It's so difficult. Player matchups, just like you run into something like that that's really tough. So I think for him, he'll be more motivated than ever. In 2020, he's got 2 extra mouths to feed, right? So he'll be, I'm sure, playing his heart out. And, you know, he played really well at any regional finals. He made it really far in that tournament despite not winning it or anything. But I think this is just one of those cases where, like, those other 2 players were, like, right moment, right time. They played incredible. It's not that Banchan had, like, a really terrible performance. It's just that his 2 opponents were so good.
Let's talk about both birds, Angry Bird and Big Bird. Big Bird, of course, Evo finalist. Angry Bird not too happy on stage at one point, you know, with the lag issues that were happening on stage there. But just talk about their tournaments and where you see them going in 2020, Sherry.
These 2 players are probably the 2 best players out of the UAE. Big Bird, he was actually predicted, he was one of my predicted people to win this tournament, actually, and unfortunately he didn't, but I don't see them slowing down anytime soon. Angry Bird, he's been growing so much as a player. Same for Big Bird. Big Bird has always been a really strong player, and I think he's had problems clutching it out in the past couple years. He hasn't had the greatest performance in Capcom Cup last year or the other years that he's qualified in, but Evo was the first time I've seen him play, and I was like, holy crap, he's broken the ceiling. Like, he's always had a problem playing like himself, because I played him casuals all the time, and I'm always like, how does he not win tournaments? Like, he is an amazing player. He's almost unstoppable in casuals, and I couldn't see him bring that to tournament, but now he has.
Who are some players, actually, because you play a lot against these people in casuals or just practicing, labbing, whatever. Who are some players that you're like, man, playing them in casuals, you see their potential, but maybe it's not necessarily realized on stage?
I think Smug is one of them. He hasn't had the greatest performance this year, but playing against him, he is actually a really technical person, and he's actually shown me a lot of things in the matchup that I didn't even know about. Like, he does this thing with spacing where he's like, hey, if you're in the corner, you kind of stand under the timer. I don't know if you noticed this. Actually, a lot of top players do this unknowingly. They might do it subconsciously, because I was talking to Chris T, who is actually one of SoCal's best players, and he did it as well, but he didn't know that other players did it as well. Okay. So Smug was telling me how, like, players, when he has a character in the corner, he likes to stand under the timer, and that's like the perfect range to anti-air if they were to jump, but to whiff punish if they were to press a button. Yeah. And a lot of players don't know this. And Smug has taught me a lot, and he's one of the players. It's really unfortunate to see him not do so well, because he really has a mental block against Rashid. Because I feel like he is on the same level as these Rashid players, but he just has this mental block where he loses against them. Like, any type of Rashid, for some reason he just loses to them. And I hope he gets over that hurdle, because I think he would show how great of a player he is once he gets over that hurdle.
Who are some of the players that you've really scrimmed against a lot that remain in the tournament, and some thoughts on them as well?
Let's see. Who do I normally play against? I play against Idom every single time I see him, and he's one of those, he plays multiple characters as well. So it's never fun playing against his Laura, because I don't like getting mixed up, and I feel like I don't know how to play the game when I'm playing against him, because I'm like, I don't know which way to block. You know, his setups are amazing. He also has multiple characters, and it's funny because his secondary character is Poison, and I'd say her playstyle is completely different from the playstyle that he has with Laura. So it's crazy, because most players, they play characters that all relatively have the same game plan. So he plays 2 different characters with 2 completely different game plans, and he does really well with them. I play Luffy. Luffy is another player. He plays Mika, our Mika, and she kind of has the same game plan as Laura. not so much in the neutral, but they're both heavy mix-up characters. And it makes it a game of 50-50s, of guessing. And those two players, they've got it down on lock what players what player tendencies are, where they make you feel like, why am I guessing wrong every single time? Why do I not know how to play this game? So I played against those two players a lot, and it's not fun, but it can be fun because you learn a lot.
Absolutely. Sajam, we'll start with you on this one. Let's talk dream matchups. We know the field of 16. If you were to pick one matchup from the remaining pool that you absolutely want to see here today, what would it be?
Well, the obvious answer for me would be Punk Problem, but we already get to see that. So I would say somehow, some way, no, but
guaranteed.
It's changed for me, right, because of that. So
it?
what it's going to be is Punk wins, he makes it all the way to winners finals, and then Tokido cars through the losers bracket, and we get Punk Tokido finals. Wow. So that to me would be like the unbelievable, how did it end up this way, like full circle moment for me at a Capcom Cup Finals.
Number 1 versus number 2.
That'd be incredible. I would love to watch that.
It could happen. It could happen, I think. Tokido just needs to make it all the way to Grand Finals, and hopefully Punk stays there.
Just make it all the way to Grand
It's
Finals.
Tokido.
So here
It's
would be
Tokido.
his path. Punk would have to beat Problem X, then the winner of Fudo Oil King. In the losers bracket, Tokido would have to beat Infectious. Then,
he has all kinds of
wait
matches
for
after
whoever
that.
is coming down from the winners. But Tokido will not have an easy journey to the Grand Finals, but that would be one heck of a Grand Final if number 1 and number 2, and 2 of the top predicted winners coming into Capcom Cup were the meet in the Grand Finals. How about for you, Sherry? What would be a dream matchup?
He called it because
You called it. Oh, you both had the same one.
because the thing is, Punk and Tokido, it's not just that they're number 1 and number 2. Punk and Tokido has had such a history playing against each other throughout this season, and it's always been really close. You know, at EVO last year, Tokido beat Punk. Well, that was last year, right?
2017.
2017. They were in the Grand Finals, and then Tokido had beaten Punk, and they.
And that was the year that Punk was slated to win everything after
Exactly.
that incredible year that he had.
Exactly, and it's the same thing for here. You know, Punk is kind of slated to win Capcom Cup as well, but Tokido is there, and if they played again, I think it would be a great match because they're two incredible players, and they've had such history going back and forth.
As a competitor, how much would that weigh into Punk's mind? Take us into the mind of Punk the competitor. Will he be thinking a lot about, hey, I'm going to get 2017 back from you right now?
If he has to play Tokido, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't want to play Tokido. Tokido is a really tough opponent to beat. Not only that, it's kind of the matchup. If we want to talk about the matchup, I think a lot of Karen players don't like the matchup versus Akuma because he's a character that has a lot of mobility. He doesn't necessarily have to stay on the ground, but even if he was to stay on the ground versus Karen, his buttons are great. He has great movement speed, and he's actually one of the few characters that can contest Karen's buttons on the ground. And he has the same thing, corner carry, lots of damage. You know, that is a matchup Punk might not want to play, but if it was to go down, I think Punk would have the confidence going in, like, this is going to be my Capcom Cup.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those matchups where, like, when you think about it really, you're like, man, I almost don't want it to happen for Punk's sake, right? Because it's like such a tough matchup historically for him. They've had some close sets, even like the NCR set that they played, I think that was this year. That was like really, really close, and it's one of those moments where it's like, as much as I would like to see it for Punk, I'm sure, yeah, he would probably prefer it to be anybody else just because of the history.
So let's talk about Punk's 2019, because in 2017, everyone will agree he had an incredible year, didn't win EVO, didn't win Capcom Cup. So we are here, another incredible year, set the record for most points in CPT, didn't win EVO, and let's just hypothesize that he doesn't win Capcom Cup. What does that mean for Punk's 2019? How will we look back on Punk's 2019 if that is the case?
Yeah, I mean, I still think you look at the overall season and how many fantastic players he's beaten at the highest level, and you have to say, like, he had an incredible year. And that just gives you, like, the level of play that he is at where he could not win the 2 big ones and still be considered, like, maybe the best player of the year, maybe one of the best to ever do it for Street Fighter V, right? Like, that's just how good of a player he is. And he's had some close results this year, obviously. He was really close to winning EVO Japan at the beginning of the year. And so, like, here, you know, he's slated to maybe make it into top 8 winner's side. He's very close, and I think he's one of those players that no matter what, you just look at how his peaks, and you're like, man, he is such an incredible player.
All right, rapid fire, couple questions left before we close out the show here. Sherry, we'll start with you with these. Sajam, we'll go to you next. Prediction for the winner of the 2019 Capcom Cup?
Punk.
Fudo.
I like that you switched it up there. One sentence. What will 2020 look like in Street Fighter competition?
That's a hard one. I think the same players that have been dominating this year are probably going to dominate next year as well.
Yeah, I think the level just goes up and up and up.
Yeah.
What do you think the announcements will be after the tournament? What will be revealed?
I think there will be a character reveal, and I think they're going to announce the changes that they're making for CPT 2020.
I think they're going to drop 10 new characters.
10?
10
new characters.
Why not? Whole
Yeah.
new game.
Yeah,
Street
that's
Fighter
what I'm
6 available
I thought it
now.
was
Actually, it's
fun.
going to be, we are 39 right now. They're going to drop 41 more characters. Yeah.
That'd be great.
More than
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. 80 characters.
Will one of them be Hakan?
No.
Come on.
Absolutely
No.
not. There's no
My
way.
Turkish boy. Let's
41,
go.
41
Come on.
problems and a Hakan ain't one. That's just how it be.
I can't believe this. All right, Sherry, thank you very much for joining us here on the second half. Sajam, thank you very much for joining us all weekend. Jacob Wolf, the 2018 Esports Journalist of the Year, joined us as well throughout the weekend. Thank you to him. Thank you to all of our crew behind the scenes, Daniel J. Collette, and our wonderful crew back in Bristol, here in Los Angeles as well. Now the time has come. Let's see who will be your 2019 Capcom Cup winner. Will it be Punk? Will it be Tokido? Will it be the rest of the field? We are now going to find out. You can stay right here, in fact, because we here at ESPN Esports will be hosting the Capcom stream. You can find us at twitch.tv/ESPN Esports. You already know that because you're watching us here. But enjoy the festivities. A new champion will be crowned here today at LA Live at the Novo in Los Angeles, California. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Pick a side. Will you live? Will you die? Will you quit? Will you try? Sweating eyes. Who am I? Champion till I die. Every morning, every night. Boy, I gotta look alive. Now you can hear the crowd going.
Oh, yes, the jab. This is going to be started. I think Mango's going to do it. Yes, he is.
Pressing more with the Sonic moves against Problem X, finds an opening, uses the bar, activates off the target combo. Can he get it? Problem X takes it over. Daigo.
Nice! It's a walk-up. I can't believe it. And he got super. Is he going to actually kill him? No way. He walked the entire strip. Are you serious? Oh, yeah, you're dead. You're dead.
Gatsuka's got it all to do. Last year's champions in big
Oh,
trouble.
he wanted the activation.
Throws the back, the forward dash. No!
And again, he interrupts.